thing I wanted to mention is that if you wanted to know for absolutely sure that this coil pack was bad before you replaced it, one thing you could do, you could take the original coil pack and... Okay, so today we're looking at a 2013 Subaru Impreza. It has a 2.0 liter engine. It's got a check engine light on. So let's go inside the car and we'll hook up our scan tool and we'll see what we can find out. Okay, and as you can see, check engine light is on, along with the traction light. The brake light is on because I have the emergency brake pulled. And also you'll notice the cruise control light is flashing, which is typical when your check engine light is on. We've got 124,000 miles on the car, and the car seems to be running pretty smooth. Okay, let's hook up our scan tool. Okay, and if we look up under the dash, we'll be able to locate the OBD2 port where we can plug our scan tool into. It's right there. Okay, it can only plug in one way. Okay, so that's now installed. And this is just a simple code reader, nothing fancy. As a matter of fact, I'll leave a link down in the description if you want to investigate this little scan tool a little bit further. It's really all I need for my purposes. And to properly read your code, the key needs to be in the on position without the engine running. Alright, let's see what our little code reader says. Okay, so if you caught that little blip, it did say DTC1, and that means diagnostic trouble code. So we're going to hit enter, see what that is, and it says that there is one fault, 0 pending. So let's hit enter. Okay, and the code is a P0301, and code 1 of 1, that means there's no other codes. And a P0301 means misfire on number 1 cylinder. If it was a misfire on number 2 cylinder, it would be 302, and if it was a misfire on number 3, it'd be 303, and so forth. So let's go back under the hood. Okay, so we know we have a cylinder number 1 misfire, but we don't know why right now. I have my suspicion that it's a coil pack, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But first things first, before we do anything, let's disconnect the battery cable, which is a good practice when you start disconnecting any connectors underneath the hood. Okay, good pair of safety glasses is always a good practice, and I like to wear some gloves too. Okay, negative battery cable is going to be a 10 millimeter. Just going to loosen that up. Give it a little wiggle wiggle, and we're just going to keep it out of the way, making sure it doesn't touch that terminal. This way, anything that we do when we're disconnecting connectors and things like that, it's not going to create a spark, and a spark can damage computer systems. That's why it's always a good practice to disconnect that cable before you start taking apart any connectors. Alright, let's go over to this side. The way these 2.0 liter engines are laid out, this is number 1, that's number 2, this is number 3, and that's number 4 cylinder. So we have a cylinder number 1 misfire, which is going to be this cylinder right here. And so the first thing we need to do is to remove this airbox assembly right here so we can better reach cylinder number 1. And at the same time, we're going to check the air filter to make sure that it's not clogged up. Okay, the connector to the master airflow sensor has to come off, which is nothing more than pressing down that tab as you're pulling. You have to undo the clamp on this ductwork, which is the air intake. And as you can see, the air filter is a little dirty, but not dirty enough to cause a misfire issue. I'm just going to go beat a lot of that trash out of the filter real quick while I got it out. And then I'll show you a quick way to determine whether your air filter needs to be replaced or not. Just hold it up to the sun, and if you can see the sun through that filter, that means you got a little bit of time left. So let's carry on. Okay, and now to gain a clear path to coil pack number 1, I'm going to go ahead and take the lower part of the airbox assembly out and out of the way. It was simply secured on with a 10 millimeter bolt right there, and inside the airbox there was a 10 millimeter nut right there. Okay, and now that we have that airbox assembly totally out of the way, we have a clear path to coil pack number 1, and this is coil pack number 3 just for reference over here. But this is the one we're going to be focusing on since we have a P0301 code. It's going to require a 10 millimeter socket, and I just prefer to use a 1/4 inch drive ratchet. Let's go ahead and take that coil pack out. It's just one bolt, and it shouldn't be on there too tight. And while I'm spinning this bolt out, I'll tell you why I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's the coil pack that I need to replace instead of anything else right now. This car had a check engine light come on about a year ago at 110,000 miles, and it was a P0301 code at that time. But the spark plugs had never been replaced up to that point. So we did the logical thing and replaced the spark plugs since they were well past due. And that seemed to take care of the problem at the time. We cleared the check engine light, and the check engine light actually stayed off for about a year. clear. So problem was solved. But now, a year later, the P0301 code has come back, same cylinder, so we can safely assume now that, being that the spark plugs are fairly new, that now the coil pack needs to be replaced. Now before you pull the coil pack out, the connector needs to come off. It's just a simple push and pull. You've got to give it a little wiggle and it'll come right out when you push that little clip in. And now the coil pack should be freed up to come right out. Okay, and this is the coil pack. It is indeed the original one, never been replaced. It's a good idea to examine that connector right while you're down here to make sure there's no burn marks on the connector, no signs of water intrusion. Inspect the wires themselves to make sure that nothing is chafed and the connector itself is not broken, and everything looks good. I don't see any problems. Okay, and I have chosen today to replace the original coil with a new coil made by A Premium. And the reason I've selected this coil is because I've had good luck with them in the past. They're made of very high quality material. As you can see side by side with the original coil, everything is identical. The connectors are the same, which means the wiring harness is going to click into place just as the original one did. The boots are identical, everything is the same. So the next thing to do is put in our new coil pack and hook everything back up. Okay, it goes back in the same way, just presses in. There's a snug fit going over that spark plug. You might have to twist it a little bit. Okay, I can feel it seat down on top of that spark plug. And one thing I forgot to mention, make sure you look down inside the boot on the original coil pack and make sure that you don't see any signs of burning or arcing between the contact in the boot and the tip of the spark plug, because that certainly can cause a misfire code to come about as well. But I've looked down in here and I don't see any signs of a poor connection, so we're going to proceed on. Okay, we're just going to secure the coil pack in with that 10mm bolt. And I just like to put it in hand tight as far as I can. That way I know that I'm not stripping the threads out or anything like that. And it's going in just fine. And we're going to use our 1/4" ratchet and we're just going to tighten it down. It doesn't need to be crazy tight. Just snug it up. And we're going to just put our connector back on and you should hear it snap into place, which it just did. And I'm just going to give it a little wiggle and pull on it to make sure that it's seated. Don't pull on the wires, just pull on the connector to make sure that it's seated, which it is. Okay, so the coil pack is installed, wiring harness is secured, everything is just fine. Now I just have to assemble the airbox. One thing I wanted to mention is that if you wanted to know for absolutely sure that this coil pack was bad before you replaced it, one thing you could do, you could take the original coil pack and swap it with number 3 coil pack, and then clear your check engine light, clear all your codes, and test drive it. And then when the check engine light comes back on, look and see what the code is. If it's now a misfire code for number 3, then that means the misfire followed the bad coil pack, and now you know for certain that the coil pack needs to be replaced. But I skipped that step because I can reasonably assume that the coil pack was faulty simply because we've had this issue a year ago and we replaced the spark plugs. But I have simply skipped that step because knowing the history of the car, I can reasonably assume that that coil pack was bad. So that's why I went ahead and replaced it with a new one. But just in case you wanted to do that extra step yourself, if you're in a little bit different situation and you want to make sure that the coil pack is faulty before you replace it, you could just swap coil packs and see if your misfire goes to the next cylinder where the suspect coil pack is installed, and then you'll know for sure. Okay, now all we need to do is put our airbox assembly back in. Okay, we're going to put our air filter back in, assemble the rest of the airbox, put our ductwork back together, tighten down our clamp. Definitely got to remember to hook our mass airflow sensor back up. Okay, and that's that. Next thing to do is connect our battery. Just tighten it down with that 10mm wrench, nice and snug. Okay, let's crank it back up. Okay, seems to be running pretty smooth. I don't see any check engine light on right there. Traction control light is off, and the little cruise light that was flashing is now off. Let's hook our scan tool back up and see if there's any codes in the system. Let's turn the car back off to do that. Okay, our scan tool's hooked back up. Key in the on position, engine off. We're scanning. Okay, let's see if there's a DTC. No codes. Okay, so the codes have cleared. I think what I'm going to do anyway is I'm just going to do a manual erase. Let's do that. Erase, just in case that there's any code stored in the memory. And it said erase failed, probably because there's no codes in there. So we're good. Okay, we've got our tool unplugged. Let's start it back up one more time. And everything seems to be fine. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to test drive it for about 20-30 miles, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to check the codes to see if there's anything that has set. If it is, I'll erase it and continue to test drive it. But I think we're going to be in the clear. It's running fine now. So I hope this little tutorial has helped you in some small way. If you come across the P0301 code in your car, I hope this helps you and gives you the confidence to tackle the repair yourself. And I really am satisfied with that coil from A Premium. Like I said, I've used them before and they've done me good service, and it looks like it did the trick on this Subaru as well. Thanks for watching.